Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the award-winning recovery podcast, Get in the Herd, brought to you by the McShin Foundation. Today is a special episode. Today we have with us someone who's been a champion of recovery issues throughout her term in Congress. And I've got John, I've got Carol, the co-founders of the McShin Foundation. I'd like to first kick it off to John Shinholser, president and co-founder of the McShin Foundation, to introduce what we've got going on this evening. So thank you all for being here, for everyone tuning in today, and of course, Justin, as always. So thank you, John.
Thank you, Nathan. Welcome, Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. Of course, I got my wife, Carol McDaid, on my side here, so I'll probably be a different man tonight than I would be if she wasn't here, but it's probably good for everybody. Tonight, we got a marvelous conversation centered around a very important issue, and I'm going to let Abby introduce that to you in a minute. But first, don't want to waste a lot of time. Abby is a champion of recovery, but I want y'all to see how she looks in action when she's standing up for recovery. We got a short clip we want the audience to view real quick. So, Nathan, hit it.
Madam Speaker, I rise to speak on the House floor about Summer Barrow. Summer was born on the 4th of July and was named for the season. Her mother, Carrie Colvin, said that Summer was a firecracker. She was vivacious. She loved to dance. She loved to sing. She loved music. But Summer died of a fentanyl overdose in January of 2020. Summer's substance use disorder began after she was prescribed oxycodone after a car accident, and when the prescription ran out, she turned to heroin. This vibrant young woman lost her life to a substance use disorder, and amid her loss, her mother, Carrie, has turned to advocacy. And in her honor, I was proud to introduce the Bipartisan Support for Recovery Act, legislation that would create guaranteed funding stream for recovery support services and community organizations. Of her daughter, Carrie said, "I know what she would want is to say, please get help. This bill would help deliver that help to others, just as Summer and so many others that we have lost to substance use disorder would have wanted."
Wow, look at that in action. Just a brief history before we get to the Congresswoman, Abby. We've been working on this thought process for quite a while now, for years. And I first came to my attention 20 years ago when I got familiar with the block grant. And I'm thinking, why aren't they spending some of this money on these non-government organizations that are doing a pretty powerful lift in the communities? As time goes by and members of Congress come and go, we started a process before. And then when you got elected, you made this a campaign promise. Look, I'm going to look after the recovery folks. We're going to get this done. And you fulfilled that promise and commitment. I realize you can't hit the hammer and get it passed. It's up to us to do our lifting now. Mm-hmm. And I think we got folks nationwide willing to do that. But without any further ado, Abby, what's your take and your thoughts on how important this legislation is?
Well, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. And, this issue is so important to me, and this legislation is important to me because I have heard incredible stories of challenge, as perhaps many who are listening today and watching us today have known in their own lives. And the conversation that I had with Summer's mother some time ago when she told me Summer's story is just another reason why I continue to be so committed to this issue. And it's because individuals who are in the process of recovery need support. They need that ongoing support. And this legislation is important because it recognizes that part of contending with substance use disorders in our communities, it's education, it's treatment, it's prevention, but ultimately it's also recovery, because we try to prevent people from facing addiction and substance use disorder. We provide treatment to those who are in crisis and need the support. And then at that last step, which is the lifelong commitment that so many people are committed to and trying to hold on to, that's where we falter in our support. And so ensuring that there is a set aside where we are saying, yes, like treatment's important. Yes, prevention's important, but yes, recovery is important. These dollars should be blocked. They should be focused on recovery. That is what I'm advocating for. And so this 10% set aside, it benefits the organizations that are already doing the hard work. It would be funding for those organizations that are helping those who are struggling, who are committed and trying and at times faltering in their recovery process. And the set aside requirement would ensure that states must spend a portion of their block grant funding on recovery programs with a record of success, and peer support specialist programs that really help Virginians and community members across the country, where there are programs that are doing the good work that McShin is doing locally in the district that I represent. And this dedicated funding stream, the real value here is it would strengthen, not only would it signal our commitment to recovery, but it also is an investment in this recovery space. It gives states and providers the certainty that they need, because part of the challenge is that with funding is ebbing and flowing and you don't know kind of what the possibilities of support may be, from a financial perspective, it becomes very difficult to build up the programs that are vital to saving lives and supporting people through their recovery. And so this bill would provide assistance to recovery-focused community centers, schools, homes, ministries, law enforcement-led programs, really all-encompassing, because people find recovery in different spaces that work for them. And the recovery efforts that would be supported would be reducing discrimination and the stigma at the local level for those who are in recovery, and really kind of working on that long-term commitment and that focus on their own recovery, increasing access to peer recovery support services, coordinating with local healthcare providers, coordinating with local law enforcement organizations for folks in recovery who may have had criminal justice issues along the way, and working with public health organizations in this larger response effort. We continue to advocate for this bill. I also support additional funding for the block grant, the substance abuse block grant. So I think it's important to note it's not about kind of taking money from the treatment or the prevention or the education side of it. I advocate for, and I believe we need additional funding to this program overall. And we also need to ensure that we are establishing a real expectation of investing in the long-term recovery of individuals throughout our communities. It's what I'm advocating for. We're really working to garner support, regardless of how people may feel about increasing funding. When we look at the investments, like looking at this from an investment standpoint, ensuring that someone who's taken that hard step of focusing on their own recovery, of trying to get treatment, of trying to contend with their substance use disorder, ensuring that they can be successful is an investment that we should be making. It's an investment in an individual, but more broadly, it's an investment in our community, in the economy. I could go on and on in terms of the list there. But that's why I'm so passionate about this. I think it's such a straightforward point of focus, and we continue to work to garner pretty broad support about it. So certainly anybody who's listening, I encourage your advocacy, because the more people who know about this piece of legislation and continue to advocate for it, the better.
I'm glad you brought in that point about we need folks to advocate, because I've personally been to 44 different states visiting local recovery community organizations, and I've actually spoken in 42 different states correctional facilities. So I know the pulse is there in the community, but I want to bring in Carol and ask her what we have to do moving forward to get the support we need nationwide. What do we got to do at this point?
Sure. Well, first of all, Nathan, thanks for hosting us and kicking us off. And Congresswoman Spanberger, thank you so much. I know you don't like titles, but I will give you the respect you've earned. We just could not have a better champion. There's people who are like you who have to be and are good tacticians and politicians. And there's also elected officials who get steeped in the details of the issues and the bills that they choose to introduce. And we're so glad that you've got both. You are both a master of the details and the substance of legislation, but also you've got the heart for it. And I know I speak for the whole recovery community when I say that we owe you a debt of gratitude for really introducing an important piece of legislation that would make these changes that we're all talking about permanent and have a chance to be a permanent fixture in the United States federal budget. So what is there left to do? I think many of you, I'm grateful, have been engaged in a really year-long, fast-paced advocacy effort, both on the House and the Senate side, to what I consider to be sort of lock and key legislation. And one is, we were lucky enough to have the president put in his budget plan to Congress for the first time money to increase the block grant and to have a 10% set aside. So we got a great start thanks to the advocacy and people electeds like Abby, who have really pushed for these issues across the board, not just on this piece of legislation. But I think that we got it in the budget, and then we got it through the House Appropriations Committee, and there is an increase in the block grant and the set aside, and we need both. You have to have both of these to happen. And then the third piece, to unlock it, is Abby's legislation, which would make all these changes permanent. But we have done the good work. Many of you around the country have engaged your members of Congress on the House and Senate side, mostly in appropriations, but we've been branching out more, and we'll continue to branch out more to the authorizing committees as we begin further pressing the co-sponsors on Congresswoman Spanberger's bill, and then also to add additional co-sponsors and ask that there be hearings at the appropriate committees and markups to move the bill forward. So we really want people, if they have not already sent a letter in to co-sponsor Congresswoman Spanberger's bill, which is HR 4897. I always transfer those. And you can go to the Faces and Voices of Recovery.org website, and you can send a letter in asking your member of Congress to co-sponsor this legislation. We don't have a Senate companion yet, but I think, and you can go to the McShin website, I think, is also, you can link to it.
Now,
the link is in the comments right now. So if you
Great.
sorry, it's being scrolled right through, and actually I'm looking. It is 4897. I'm looking at the advocacy work.
That's great.
Yeah, perfect.
And it is not. It's a bipartisan as of right. We got two different champs, but maybe first you, Abby, talk about how many co-sponsors we need, and then Carol, you can weigh in after Abby on that.
Absolutely. And so the question I see popping up is, can there be bipartisan support for this? There is. And really, when we look kind of across the board, we in Congress and kind of from a partisan standpoint, I'm a Democrat. We've done a fair amount of work in the advocacy and supporting addiction recovery, contending with substance use disorder. We've done a fair amount in some single partisan bills with the American Rescue Plan as well. But this bill in particular is heavily, heavily bipartisan.
Yes.
And I would just actually point to, but we need more co-sponsors. And
yes.
And before I kind of speak to the bipartisan nature of this issue and advocacy, I would say, we need more co-sponsors. I'm working to get co-sponsors to join. Certainly any advocacy from constituents will help kind of nudge people. I can talk to somebody on the House floor about the bill, but hearing from constituents is a really compelling reason to do a review of a piece of legislation. I think notably, I work with Congressman McKinley, who is a Republican from West Virginia, on a whole host of issues. He is so incredibly good on issues related to supporting recovery and supporting our efforts to really fight to fight against substance use disorder and show a real commitment to people in recovery. Notably, in September, we know that SAMHSA is going to launch a new Office of Recovery. So Congressman McKinley and I sent a letter over because we want a full briefing. We really want to know what that office is going to be about. We continue to work on legislation together, but there's a variety of other bills. There's a bill focused on substance use disorders during the pandemic. That's bipartisan. A Republican from Pennsylvania, a Democrat from Washington State. There's a bill that authorizes state opioid response grant program and that's a Republican from Indiana and a Democrat from Maryland. So across the board, when we're looking at these issues, so frequently we can find bipartisan support. Not universal, but still, because it costs money to make investments in our community. But I will argue any minute of the day that investments we're making in recovery are investments we're making in individuals, in putting people back to work, so they're tax paying, employed, like individuals who are living the life that they want to live, strengthening their skills and ability as parents, because certainly when parents are struggling with substance use disorder, that impacts the entirety of their family. Like the list goes on and on as to why these investments in recovery are so valuable, of course, to the individual that we're impacting, but far beyond that to the larger community. So yes, it is bipartisan. Any advocacy, any calls for support that you can make to your local member of Congress is fantastic, because, again, I'll continue to kind of sing from the rooftops about what this bill can do and why it's important. And again, I think as Carol mentioned, we certainly see in the president's budget, and then also in the funding that we've put forward. And so the appropriations, the House of Representatives, we've passed the appropriations bill for health and human services. It's now with the Senate. The Senate is being the Senate, which is to say relatively slow, if I may if I may say that. But they're in our bill that we have sent over for the Senate, and we are now waiting on the Senate. There's a $3.14 billion increase in funding, which, that's funding for mental health and funding for substance use treatment, including this 10% set aside to support recovery services. Also funding for the 988 suicide prevention phone number. The list goes on in terms of the real good investments in this bill. Want to see it get across the finish line in the Senate so that it can be signed into law. But ultimately, I want to make sure that this wasn't a one-time effort to say this set aside is important, that forever and ever, we recognize that we have to invest in recovery and ensure that there are dedicated funds for that purpose.
You mentioned the SOR funding stream. I just want to let you know that here in Virginia, our state manager, Michael Zohab, has done an incredible job really trying to drive some funds to the Virginia Association of Recovery Residences to include some program and reimbursement. So McShin's actually been able to receive some of that SOR money. Thank you mostly to Michael Zohab for having faith in the recovering community. So there's a person that understands the value and recognizes the need to really tee up these NGOs out there. But Carol, I know you're itching to talk just a bit about what we need to do nationwide to get these other RCOs, these other NGOs engaged.
Yeah, I think that if folks need to, many of you, we've done over 55 meetings in the House and the Senate to help get us where we are today, which is in both House and Senate appropriations bills, as far as they have gone today, which we still have work to do. And it could be that we have a short-term extension of the budget for a month or maybe two. And then I think that the will be there to pass this legislation, and we won't get stuck with another flat year of flat funding. But I think groups need to do what they've been doing, but don't tire out. I know y'all have done a lot of work to get, because Abby, you'd be really impressed. I mean, we have had such great support from Republicans and Democrats in the Senate too. I mean, it has been, Abby really emphasized that this is bipartisan, and I can't tell you how important it is as recovery advocates to stay purple. You can't pick a team. Our issue is bigger than politics. You cannot pick a team, because one team could be up one year and one team could be up the other year, and you don't want to have picked a favorite and made enemies. So staying purple is extremely important. It's not only important, it's the right thing to do, but it's effective. I mean, and our issue speaks loudly about how staying in the middle, we've gotten results, and we continue to have this effort that Abby's such a critical part of be bipartisan in the House and Senate. So people should touch their members of Congress who sit on the appropriations, even though you've shored them up, touch them again and just say the process isn't over. We just want to check in to see if you've heard of any opposition or anything, but so far so good. And the same in the Senate for those of you who have Senate Appropriations Committee members. And then for everyone else, they need to make sure that not just that you've sent a letter on an advocacy platform, but that you've called the health LAs in your member of Congress's office and asked them to get on this bill. And you can always get a list by going to congress.gov to see who the latest co-sponsors are. and then putting in the number of Abby's bill, which is HR 4897. Thank you.
Yeah, Nate, I see you shaking your head back there. You got what's going on, buddy?
Well, I'm looking at this bipartisan list of co-sponsors here, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I also, what I'm seeing, I'm new in this space as a recovery advocate, and what I love is that like I have been empowered by John and Carol and others in this community, and as well, you too. Representative Spanberger, I'll say it the first time, and then I'll say Abigail after that. Okay. I have to give you props for the work that you do and honor the position. But it's because of you and the work that you all have done, empowering people like me to continue to tell my story and to build from there. And now I have the privilege and the honor of helping the next person to tell their story. And I'm overwhelmed at that sometimes. It's scary. I was just before the show, I was saying, I'm like, oh, Carol, I've told you this before. I'm like, I don't belong in this space. I feel, scared and intimidated. But the reality is that, we're supporting these community-based recovery solutions that do the work that the best and have the best outcomes. And if anything, the pandemic has done is just continue to prove that, while the government was shutting down, while treatment centers were turning away people, while hospitals weren't allowing anybody to come in unless you had COVID, community-based non-governmental organizations like the McShin Foundation continue to adapt and accommodate. And yes, we can look at the numbers, and 100,000 people or more, dying of overdoses in a year is incredibly powerful. It's we just had someone very young, very close, just a couple of days ago, and it's very sad. It's always very sad. And listening to the story you told too, and I wonder what those numbers would have been if organizations like us hadn't been around. And so I'm glad that y'all are recognizing this, up there, seeing, President Biden, in the debates sit there and say that this can't be, a criminal justice issue. It has to be a public health issue. And to not only say that, but live it in this first budget is a powerful message to people like me, newish in recovery, and just discovering my own voice and hopefully carrying my voice and singing with the other choir, and bringing the new people out. So I was a vocal major a long, long time ago. But anyway, I want to say thank you to that. But I also, I'm like, you've got, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, how do we get these people from across the state? How do we continue to do this work? Where I know we've kept saying this, I'm thinking my own congressman is, next door to you, and he's not on this list. And I'm just like, wait a second here. And I'm like, I know his wife too. And I'm like, I got to call up Colette and be like, yo, what are we doing here?
That's
Nate,
a fair point. That's
Yeah.
a fair point, Nathan. Virginians need to step up. You're right.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll pledge to make a call, Nathan.
And I will, in terms of my other Virginians, that's something I can push on a bit more locally. But even if you think about and look at, and we have so many bills constantly circulating. So I would say anybody who's out there who looks at the list or, who says, oh my goodness, finds out that their rep's not on the bill yet. I'm going to use yet, right? Because frankly, there's so much circulating. We're working on so many things.
Yeah.
I can't talk to everybody. I try sometimes, but I can't talk to everybody. So, if I can sort of make 2 points at one, Nathan, talking about what you were talking about in terms of people and spaces, I would say that anyone with a unique or an important lived experience, no matter what it is, but today we're talking about substance use disorders and recovery, like your experience matters, your challenges, how you've overcome them, how you've stumbled, how they've impacted your life and everything kind of along the way. Whatever you are willing to share, whatever you are able to bring and willing to bring to that table of advocacy, it helps inform people who are in the role of writing, drafting, advocating for, and ultimately voting on legislation. Because every lawmaker has a different set of experiences. Some have been impacted very closely by substance use disorders. Others haven't. I haven't personally been in the way some of my colleagues have with, very, very close loved ones who've been lost to an overdose. But hearing the stories of people that to me are triumphant, to me are stories of challenge and grit and resilience, when I hear those stories and I recognize I have a potential ability to make it a bit more straightforward for the person behind you, Nathan, or to make sure that your recovery is long-term, and a lifetime, right? Like, that's where I can be helpful. And so being able to recognize, like, he's putting in the work, he's doing the advocacy. My role in this is potentially supporting that. Like, that is where your voice in the advocacy space is so remarkably important. And so to anybody who's listening, who might be thinking like Nathan, well, what do I bring to this conversation? I don't want to sit down with a member of Congress or any of that. Like, we represent you, right? At the end of the day, like, we're not special. I've got 3 kids. They like to, they fuss at me the way the way other people get fussed at. Like, I've got sisters, I've got parents. Like, I'm a very normal person. I just happen to have this job that's a little on the less than normal side. And so hearing from other, people who have had, experiences here and there that want to say, this is what I care about and why, and you have a role to play in this. This is why we elected you. Please hear me, please do it. Like, that's what you should be doing. And Nathan, I want to say thank you, because there are many people who are in their recovery journey who have a lot of hurdles before them and challenges with maintaining their own recovery, with children, with family, with employment, with perhaps past criminal justice related issues. And so the fact that you're doing advocacy, not just for yourself, but that you're using your voice to be a voice for others who are, working on their recovery and kind of holding tight to that. And then eventually, hopefully they'll get to a point where they can do that advocacy as well. I just want to say thank you for being a voice for so many. And I just want to affirm that anybody listening, no matter where you are, like, your voice matters. And the people that represent you should hear it. And this bill is such a straightforward kind of focus on, yes, recovery matters, and we're committed to it. That really the expectation is, as soon as lawmakers and my colleagues hear about it, why would they not want to get involved, right? There's very few kind of win-win-win, everybody loves it legislation, but I am going to argue till I'm blue in the face that this is one of them.
It is.
I want to just
you're purple in the face.
Yeah, I want to do an inspirational moment here, and the reason I do this is because these videos, they go into jails and prisons all across America. We're currently getting about 1 million views a year. We expect it to double next year, but we'll have 1,000 views by the end of the week on this show right here. But people, you got to understand, Nathan, for example, just a few short years ago, he's sitting in a jail in Warrenton, Virginia, and because of a non-government organization doing this work, McShin was right across the street from the jail. He came to the jail, from the jail to the RCO, to sober living, to being a peer leader, to now here he is just a few short years later. He's a fierce national advocate for recovery support services. And the man has purpose, he's committed, and we're inspiring many. And the Richmond municipality, we have over 1,000 sober beds in Richmond, of which 500 are nationally accredited. So Richmond's got a lot of game, but every community in America should have what Richmond has here. Every state should have Congress people like we have here in Virginia. Everybody should be able to have and find their purpose when they're ready for it. And that's what's so special about this. But Nathan, you continue to amaze me with your progress and where you're at. And I must say, you have a great radio voice, man. So
He does. He does.
My mother always said I had a face for radio. So
I said voice. I didn't say face. Oh, yeah, that's right. Face for radio. Yeah, I finally got it. I'm slow, man.
She's probably watching right now, too, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Carol.
This is how it works. And Greg Williams just launched a new documentary. I hope you get to see it. It's called Tipping the Pain Scale. But they have a policeman in there from Boston, and he makes it really clear. We're not going to rest our way out of this. So let's just go after the people with the disorder, and let's win it that way. Let's get all these folks in recovery, as many as possible, and see if we can't dial back, the havoc addictions have it on America. So we're building a great big army out there to get her done. And we're just so grateful we got everybody here at the same time committed doing this work.
Well, and I think that as horrible as the past year and a half or almost 2 years has been, and certainly as we've seen the COVID-19 pandemic right alongside the substance use disorder and overdose, epidemic, there has been such a renewed focus or an awakening, or however you would describe it, where people are really seeing, I think, a bit more clearly the real challenges that others are facing, that our neighbors are facing, and that a substance use disorder is a mental health issue. Sometimes it manifests its way into a criminal justice issue, but at the end of the day, it is an issue that needs treatment. It's a challenge that individuals are facing it's a health issue, as so many other things that we so clearly recognize someone needs treatment for an array of cancer or diabetes or all these other health issues, that we're finally at a place, I think, in a society where there's this increased recognition of mental health writ large, but then certainly substance use disorder as something where people need support, and we need to treat it as a health issue and first and foremost. So I think we're at a time of opportunities to some degree, and I want to believe that because I really truly think that we are at a place where, particularly when it relates to recovery and recognizing the value and the tenuous nature of recovery, that we can make commitments that are forward-looking and forward-leaning, and we can see the success stories of people like Nathan and say, like, shouldn't we want every person who's sitting in a jail somewhere, or any person who's struggling with their recovery, to think that could be my path? And be it success in advocacy or success in, back in the workforce, wherever that may be. And the reality is it could be, but it isn't an easy path, and individuals, everybody needs support there. And so why would we not want to make that investment in ensuring the success of the individuals, which is ultimately the success of our community, our economy, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. The Marine Corps invested in me August 10th, 1982. They sent me in rehab for 6 weeks. And you just look at what we've got back in our community as a result of that one investment at one time. So investment is a key word here. But I also want to recognize our chairwoman of the board, Debbie Rosenbaum. She comes to all of these shows. She watches them all. Every now and then I'll get an email on Monday morning of something I may have said, but she's you've met her at our picnics before, but Debbie, it's always great to see you here and weighing in on these shows. And we're grateful to have you as a board member because, McShin, we couldn't do the work we do without a strong board. And I remind people all the time, people think I own McShin. No, I don't own McShin. I work for the board, and, my job is on the line sometimes. So I want to make sure I do a good job. But we've been going at it for a while now. We've got any closing thoughts here, Carol?
Well, I am so committed that even more than I was before, that together we can get this three-piece set of advocacy that we need to get done over the finish line. And again, I just want to express my gratitude. It's the season to do it, and it's also the right thing to do, to thank you for your continuing leadership that you are showing in this area. And we will do everything we can to get the rest of Virginia and the rest of the country behind your efforts. Thanks, Abby.
Right.
Thank you.
Nathan, closing thoughts?
I want to echo the thank you, John and Carol, that you both said as well, and thank you both, John and Carol, for all the work that you have done for so many years. And I look at the two of you and I think, you could have very easily, retired. You're not that you're that old. I'm just saying. Let me take myself out of that hole. I'm sorry.
It's a good thing you're in separate spaces, Nathan.
Yeah, she got her space. I got mine.
And Nathan's got his. Yeah.
Well, but you could have very, very easily checked out a long time ago. I know, John, you had a successful painting company for a long time. Carol, you are doing some incredible work, in healthcare. But the two of you don't have to do the work that you're doing. And what I love about what you do is that you bring together not only people like me who are relatively new, and then all, brand new people, but like the people I work with on a daily basis go from 6 months in recovery to almost 40 years in recovery, and I don't feel less than, unless I tell myself that, which is a story. And when I tell myself that, I talk about it, and then someone says, "No, you're not," and works with me on that. So, like, what I'm saying is that this is an incredible place to be, and you all have created that, and I love that it's not only being recognized by Representative Spanberger here, by Abigail, but it gets recognized so often, by others in the public policy sphere, and this is the apex of all that work, and we need to get it over the finish line, over that goal line. I can't make a sports metaphor over here.
Right.
But I just want to say thank you to all of you all, for doing this tremendous work. And I do want to ask one quick question though. What did you do for Thanksgiving, Abby?
Ooh, thanks for that question. So I volunteer every year at the Giving Heart, which is it's a local nonprofit in Central Virginia that typically hosts these big, beautiful community Thanksgiving meals, where homeless community members are welcomed in, and people serve a great dinner that everybody enjoys together. Because of the pandemic, it's to-go meals or delivered meals. And so I've volunteered there for a number of years. And this year, my oldest daughter, who's 13, joined me, and we were on the cranberry sauce line. So scooping the cranberry sauce
I love
to
cranberry
go,
sauce.
and it looked delicious. Scooping the cranberry sauce to go, and then putting the lids on it and stacking them up. We trays of, I think it was 48 per tray, and we were stacking them. And the folks doing the gravy were on the other side, so we had a little bit of a running competition to see who could meet their goals faster. But that's how I spent my morning, and then ultimately ended the day with dinner with my husband's family and my brothers-in-law and their spouses and kids. So it was a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you for asking, and I hope you had a good Thanksgiving as well.
Well, I'm paying for it now, so I lost a bunch of weight, so I kind of got a couple pounds back, but it don't take.
I know you were getting kind of like very, very lean there for a bit.
Well, I ain't scared to eat, but I ain't scared to lose weight either. So that's good news. But we can chat all night, but I know you're a busy woman. Any closing thoughts here?
Well, just to close out, I want to say thank you. When I first met John a number of years ago, and it may not surprise anybody who watches the podcast that I walked out his office with, 20 pages of notes and homework. So here I was, a candidate, and I frankly, my background, I used to work for CIA, so I know a lot about terrorism and nuclear proliferation and all these other issues, and I didn't know anything about substance use disorder and the recovery process. And so I got home that night, and it's like 10 o'clock at night. I popped this DVD in. I think my husband really was very unclear on what was it as a family activity. Oh, we're watching a movie, and all of a sudden it's real serious stuff and a real focus on challenges that that John wanted to make sure that anybody who's kind of putting themselves forward to represent a community understands all of the challenges that may be facing a community. So I've appreciated his advocacy ever since, and to have the chance to be with you all. For those who aren't in the Richmond area, the McShin Foundation just does incredible events where I have the opportunity to spend fun time with people. Where sometimes I hear about the recovery story, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's just, seeing who's winning the cornhole game or talking about the food. And I just really, truly appreciate that. And, I know that Summer's mom is watching. And so I just want to thank her for being such an advocate. And, through my time in office, I have had the honor of hearing from parents who've lost children. And I carry those stories in my work. We talked about Summer publicly today because Carrie's comfortable with that, but there are others who we've lost to, and I have all of their names in my head, and I do all of this work in their honor, and it's my goal to make sure that that no other parents face what they have faced. And it's also my goal that any person out there who's watching this, who looks at Nathan's story and thinks, I don't know if that could be me, like, I want to make sure that, from the halls of the United States Congress, that I can say, like, it can be you. Like, I believe it can be you, and we're doing advocacy here on Capitol Hill and writing legislation to help ensure that we can do just a bit of support to make sure that it can be you. So thanks for allowing me today. And I look forward to joining you all at some point again in the future.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. But I do want to say, in the time we had this conversation, I'm estimating 8 or 9 folks lost their life, nationwide, called, an overdose. And but I do know the work we're doing can cut that by 50% over the next few years. So it's that important. But in closing, I want to say, I tell people everywhere I go, when you get a champion of our issues, you protect that champion. And that looks like us staying clean and sober, staying in recovery, doing our job. But we got to make sure you guys stay doing your job too. So thank you so much. Happy holidays. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks
y'all have
again.
a good night.
Good night.
Yep.